Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with another Clionadh Cosmetics video. Today I'm going to tackle the next category, which is going to be my glitter iridescent multichromes. They are 7 in total and I have all them all right here as you can see. But before we jump into any more details about these eyeshadows, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. But let's just start talking about these beauties right here. So like I mentioned, they are 7 shades in total and I got these in the bundle. The bundle retails for 95 Canadian dollars, I believe, but individually these have a bit of a different price range. Some of them retail for $10.50 each and some of them retail for $21. So I will discuss that when I talk about every individual shade. But with these ones, the formula of these are very chunky. I am actually wearing one of these currently on my cheekbone as a highlighter, and you can wear them that way, but just keep in mind that they are quite glittery, hence the name. So they are, like I said, the glitter iridescent multichromes. They also have some regular iridescent multichromes, and I do have 2 of those. Both of them are from the series 2, so I am looking to expand that collection a bit more when I am going to purchase eyeshadows from Clionadh next time. But currently I mainly have these 7 right here plus an additional 2, which are, like I said, the regular iridescent multichrome formula. But let's just jump into some of the swatches of the eyeshadows. So as you can see here, they are all swatched out next to each other. The first one is called Glow, which goes from turquoise to blue to purple. Then we have Glimmer, which is blue to purple to pink. Third we have Glisten, which is a purple to pink to orange to gold. Fourth one is Gleam, which is a pink to peach to yellow gold. Next up is Gloaming, which is pink to green to blue. This is one that is absolutely stunning. And then the second to last one is Gilding, which is a yellow gold to green to blue. And then lastly we have Glint, which is green gold to blue and then to purple. With these eyeshadows, I am absolutely in love with these, and how I mainly use them are as an Enquiries highlights. They are beautiful because they have that transparent base, so they don't really have like that cast that you get sometimes when you use a deeper shade on your eyes. I am actually not wearing these on my Enquiries today because I am going to do, like I said, a demo at the end of this video so you can see them. So I have something else on my eyes completely now, but yeah, I mainly use this and it is an Enquiries highlight. But another way you can reach for these eyeshadows is obviously on their own all over the lid, but I found that they can be a bit either too sheer for me or that white cast can show up in a way. So how I like using them if I want to put them on the lid is using them over top of other eyeshadows, specifically over top of mattes. And when I go through the comparison of these, I have actually swatched them over a deep brown eyeshadow. And for all of those kind of swatches, I used one of my MAC paint pots, which is in the shade Constructivist. This is just really deep chocolatey brown, as you can see. So that's what I'm using underneath the swatches when you see that kind of dark base. But without any further rambling, I'm just going to jump into the eyeshadows one by one, and we're going to start with the one that is up here in the corner. So with this one, compared to last time, you won't be able to see any of the shifts really in the pan because they all look basically white. When I see them in the light, I can see the kind of color coming through, but I do not think that will come up in direct lights, kind of when the light bounces off them. But yeah, the first one is called Glow, and this is one of the ones that retail for $10.50 Canadian dollars. This was one of the original 3. So I think initially they released 3 of these in the original kind of iridescent category, but then they kind of separated those 3 out and created the glitter multichromes. I actually can't remember what all of them are. I think it's Glow, Glimmer, and is it Glisten? I think it might be those 3, but yeah, I know for a fact that Glow was one of those original 3. But like I mentioned before, this is a shade that shifts between like a turquoise to blue and then to purple. I have actually used this shade quite a lot, and it's one that I reach for, which is surprising to me because I'm not much of a blue eyeshadow wearer, but this one is just so beautiful. And since it has that kind of shift to purple in it, it is a bit more wearable. I absolutely love this eyeshadow, and when it comes to the comparison of this, I have 4 shades that I'm comparing it to from the Clionadh range. And with these ones, you need to keep in mind that these are iridescent shades, so they don't have a pigment or like a base pigment. So like I said, when I did the swatches, I did put that dark deep base on, but that can honestly switch out to anything. So for example, with the first comparison, I do have the shade Grisai from Clionadh, which has kind of like a maroon reddish base, and if you did put glow on top of a red base, I think it would be more similar, but I just wanted to keep it simple for the swatches, and I put it on a neutral kind of brown base. But moving on, like I said, to the comparisons, the initial one, as you can see, is glow, and it is split half-half with a base and without a base. Then next to it we have the shade Grisai, which I talked about, which is one of the glitter multichromes. Then after that we have Chandelier, which is another glitter multichrome. Then next up is Carving, which is again a glitter multichrome. And then the last comparison we have is the shade Azure, which is one of the deep iridescent multichromes. And just to show you them in here, so these are the rest of my Clionadh shades, and the ones that I'm comparing it to is Grisai, which is this one right here. We have Chandelier, which is this one right here, Carving, which is here, and then Azure, which is here. So out of these ones, I feel like the one that is closest in tone to glow is actually Azure, but it doesn't have those glitters in it. The rest, like I said, are the glitter multichromes, so they do have that glitteriness in them, but Azure is more of an iridescent shade, and it's more of a smooth finish. So although the undertone is very, very similar, the shift is very similar, the finish and the impact is quite different. Then when it comes to kind of regular eyeshadow, I only have one comparison, and that is with a blue-brown pigment. So the one I have is actually a mix between MAC Club and the Wet n Wild Comfort Zone shade, the blue and brown in there. And I feel like with the glitter multichromes, I used to use this as an example because it has that blue kind of effect to it. But with these ones, if you lay them over a deep base, you can get that blue-brown, green-brown, blue-red, whatever you want effect, just way more intense and way more sparkly, and I really, really love it. So I did want to include that swatch, but you can see the blue-brown pigment looks so dull next to the glow shade, and I have kind of stayed away from those typical duochromes recently because I do have these, and they're just so much more impactful. But yeah, this is the shade that I originally compared it to, so you can see it right here, and it does have quite a distinct shift, as you can see on camera, but just in the swatches, I think they speak for themselves, and glow is absolutely stunning. So the next shade that we are talking about is the one that is on the middle here on the top row, and that is in the shade Glimmer, which is that blue to purple to pink shift again. This shade can look quite blue in certain lighting, but then especially putting it next to glow, you can definitely see that this has more purple to it. So I would say that in this eyeshadow, the main shift is probably that purpley shift, and then it has those blue undertones as well as that distinct pink shift in it as well. This is absolutely beautiful, and I haven't reached for this too much, but I have reached for it a few times. And with this one, like I said, I think this is one of the original three, and this also retails for $10.50 Canadian dollars. So moving on to the comparisons with this eyeshadow, I actually don't have that many comparisons, so I decided to put them all into one. So the first two, as you can see, are Clionadh shades, and the other two are regular eyeshadows, or like other eyeshadows in my collection. So the first shade is the shade Grisai again. I just wanted to include this. The second one is Enamel, which is another glitter multichrome. And then next up I have a shade that is actually from the Colourpop Elemental Surprise palette, but I have depotted that, and I can't remember what the name of this is, but it is the purple in that shade palette. And then lastly we have the shade Alchemy from Nabla. And just to show you again, the shades that I'm comparing it to is Grisai, which is right here, as well as Enamel, which is this purple down at the bottom. Then for the kind of regular eyeshadows that I have to compare it to, the one that I'm talking about is this one right here. It is in my sheet palette currently, but it's originally from the Element of Surprise palette, so I don't remember what the name is. I do have it underneath this pan, but I can't be bothered taking it out because I might damage the palettes. Every time I remove a palette eyeshadow from Colourpop, it just is a risk of damaging it. But anyway, that is the shade that I have. So I feel like this one is quite similar. If you want like a mainstream kind of eyeshadow, this is something that has a similar shift to it because that has that blue to purple to it. Obviously it's lacking that glitter as well as that pink shift, but it is semi-similar, I would say. And then the last eyeshadow I have to compare is one from Nabla, and I'm not going to take it out, but it is the shade right here. And as you can see, it has that blue to purple shift, but this one is on a kind of terracotta, really warm base. So again, if you top Glimmer over maybe like a reddish base, I think this would be more similar, but the shift is very, very close, and this is again a bit more of a glittery formula. So I would say that although this isn't as kind of sparkly as the Clionadh shades, this is definitely closer than the Colourpop shade that I compared it to. The third shade that we're going to discuss today is this one right here, and this is in the shade Glisten. So Glisten is the one that I'm not sure, but I think this is another one of the original three. This is another one that retails for $10.50 Canadian dollars, and the shift is purple to pink to orangey gold. I feel like now we're getting into a bit more of a wearable shade, because purple to pink to orangey gold is shades that I think a lot of people use on an everyday basis. This one is really beautiful, but it's not one of the most impactful shades. We are going to get into some of the more special shades later on, and also the ones that are a bit more expensive, but this one is an absolutely stunning shade as well. So when it comes to the comparisons, I only have one Clionadh comparison, so that's why I did all of them together as well. So the first shade, as you can see, is the Clionadh shade, which is in Spotlight, which is one of the glitter multichromes. Then moving on to the ones that aren't from Clionadh, we have the shade Earthshine, which is from the Colourpop It's My Pleasure palette. Then next to that we have the shade Tart from the Juvia's Place Deuce palette. And then lastly, a shade from the NYX Element of Surprise palette. They don't have any shade names, but it's kind of the purple iridescent in that palette. So when it comes to the Clionadh shade that I compared it to, it is Spotlight, which is this pink right here. And to be honest, they aren't that similar. Obviously this one has quite a strong base, but yeah, I wouldn't say that they are super similar. But I wanted to have some comparisons anyway, in case you own any of these. And then when it comes to the non-Clionadh comparisons, the first one that I have is from the It's My Pleasure palette, and that is in the shade Earthshine, which is this middle shade right here. It does have that kind of purpley blue shift to it, and the base of this is like a kind of warmer, almost orangey base, and that's why I think it's very close. It's kind of important to note that with all of the non-multichrome comparisons, obviously they won't have the shift, so what I tried pairing is kind of the main shift, and in some certain cases I did put one of the kind of stronger shifts that aren't the main shift, but yeah, none of them really do have that multichrome shift in it. And I do have, I think, one eyeshadow that is quite close, but I will get to that later on and I will let you know when that happens. But none of the rest have that multichrome shift to it. Otherwise, I feel like this is quite a close shade. That orangey base though comes through quite a lot when you swatch it out, so it's not the closest. The two that I would say are closer are the ones that I talked about. So we have Clionadh Tart, which is this one right here. It does have more of an iridescent base, and hopefully you can see the shift there on camera, but I didn't have it swatched out. And it does have a pink and almost purple shift in it, but again, it's not as sparkly as the Clionadh shade. But this is a really good option, to be honest, and if you do have this palette and you do like this shade, imagine that but more intense with a kind of slight gold shift to it as well, and lots and lots of sparkle. And then the last shade that I had was the NYX Element Air palette. And I have actually potted that palette, so it is this shade right here. It looks pretty white in the palette, but it does have that kind of purple iridescent to it. I just swatched it out right there, so hopefully you can see it. But again, it is just not as intense. It's not nearly as intense, but it does have the same shifts. The only thing I would say that is different between this shade and Glisten is that this one is definitely more purple leaning, and it doesn't really have that pink and orangey gold in it. But if you're looking for an iridescent shade, this is as well a really, really good option. The fourth shade I'm talking about is this one right here, which is in the shade Gleam. Gleam is, like I mentioned before, a pink to peach to yellowy gold. This is a stunning shade, and I think this is more of a, again, wearable shade just because of the shifts in it. This one isn't as kind of strong as other ones because the shifts are quite close together, so it doesn't obviously go from like a purple to orangey gold. That is obviously a bigger jump than, for example, pink to peach to yellow gold, but the distinctness between the yellow gold and the pinky peach is quite strong still, so I feel like it is a good option, but it's just a bit more neutral than the other ones. And this one is another one that retails for $10.50 Canadian dollars. So when it comes to the comparisons, I do have 2 Clionadh shades and 2 other shades that I want to compare. The first one is Vermilion, which is one of the deep iridescent multichromes again. The second one is Aura, which is one of the iridescent multichromes, and this is actually quite a similar shade. They're not exact dupes, but they are very similar. Then next up we have Wild Child from the Anastasia Novena palette, and then lastly Cube from the Anastasia Subculture palette. So out of the Clionadh shades, like I said, we have Vermilion, which is this one right here. It has like a really similar shift to it. I'm definitely not going to be able to show this on camera, but it has a very, very strong shift to it. But again, it is more kind of flat or metallic rather than glittery. Then the next one that I compared it to is Aura, which is another one of the iridescent shades, but this is one of the ones from the series 2 rather than the glitter multichromes. So this one is again a bit more smooth, but it is more glittery than the deeper iridescent shades. But this is another beautiful shade, and they are actually really, really similar. If you do have one or the other, I would say that you don't need both. So I would say kind of just go with whichever formula you like. If you want something more sparkly and kind of flaky, go for the glitter multichrome, and if you want something a slightly bit more smooth, then go for the regular iridescent shade in Aura. When it comes to the other 2 shades, they're both from Anastasia. The first one that I put in was the shade Wild Child, which is this one right here. It's not super similar. This one definitely has a deeper base, but I feel like if you did top Gleam over a pink base, they would become quite similar. It does have that, I would say, pink to gold shift. The purple isn't really much in there, but yeah, this is a good option. It's not the best dupe, I would say. The next one up is definitely one that I would say is closer, and that one is Cube from the Subculture palette. This is one of my newer palettes in my collection, so I haven't used this much yet, but I have swatched this shade out and it's absolutely stunning. This one is definitely much smoother though, and it's not as intense or nearly as intense, but it does have that pink to like gold shift to it, so it is quite similar. I feel like when people talk about the shade, they mainly mention the pink, but in certain lightings it does have that orangey, yellowy shift to it as well. The next shade from Clionadh I'm talking about is the shade here in the middle, which is called Gloaming. This one is slightly different because it has a tad bit of a deeper base. In the pan, rather than looking white, it looks a bit more grey. This one is a super special shade, and this one goes from a yellow gold to green to blue. But I would say that in certain lights it also has like a pinkness to it, and it's absolutely stunning. I feel like this is one of the more intense shadows from Clionadh when it comes to the iridescent shades. The glitters, you can see kind of the pink and the green at the same time, so you can see the different kind of or the dimension to this, but it still has that really distinct shift as well. This is one that retails for a bit more. This one is 21 Canadian dollars, so you can definitely see the uniqueness in the price. And I actually don't have any comparisons for this shade. I went through all of my Clionadh shades and the rest of my collection, and I couldn't find anything that is similar. I think some of the shades here are a little bit similar in the shifts, but since this has that dimension to it, it is just super unique, and this is the only one out of all of the 7 that I don't have any comparisons for. So let's just jump into the next shade instead, which is this one right here. Again, these are gonna look white, but this one is in the shade Gilding. So Gilding is a yellow gold to green to blue. So in certain ways it's similar to Gloaming, but it doesn't have that pink to it. So I would say that they could potentially be similar, but this one has that super strong yellow gold shift in it, and that's the main shift, whereas with Gloaming it's just super kind of shifty and it has, like I said, more dimension to it. But going back to Gilding, it is stunning. This one is also one that is a little bit more similar to the last one as well, which I will talk about later, but this one is more yellow rather than green. But it is absolutely stunning, and it's another one that is a little bit more expensive. It is retailing for 21 Canadian dollars again. This shade is a little bit kind of special with the formula as well. I feel like this formula is a bit thicker than the rest. All of the Clionadh shades are very smooth, but this one feels a bit thicker when you pick it up. But other than that, it is a similar formula to the rest, and it's super reflective and impactful, just as the other shades are. So when it comes to the comparisons of this eyeshadow, I did split it up again because I have quite a few. I'm going to start with the one from Clionadh, and I do have 3 comparisons from them. The first one is Corrosion, which is one of the glitter multichromes. Then next to that we have the shade Foiling, which is another glitter multichrome. And then lastly we have Ochre, which is one of the deep iridescent multichromes. And again, here is my palette so I can go through them. The first shade, like I mentioned, was Corrosion, which is this one right here. We have Foiling, which is next to it. And then lastly, Ochre, which is this one right here. And I would say that all of these, Ochre is probably the one that has the simplest, or like the most similar shift. Again, it is more of a smooth formula though. It doesn't have that chunkiness to it. A tiny bit more green to it than what Gilding does, but it also have that blue base to it, or like blue shift to it in certain angles. So that is the comparisons that I have from Clionadh. Let's just move on to the other ones that I have from other brands. So as you can hopefully see, I do have 4 comparisons for this eyeshadow. The first shade is one that is originally from the I Think I Love You palette from Colourpop, but I do have it in my Sweet Clock palette, so I don't know what the shade name is, but it's just the kind of yellowy golden shade. The next shade comes from my Anastasia Jackie Aina palette, and the shade is Trust Issues. Next up we have the shade Aziza, which is from the Juvia's Place Saharan 2 palette. And lastly we have Coral, which is from the Juvia's Place Tribe palette. So looking at these eyeshadow, the first one that I compared it to honestly isn't that similar, and that is the shade that is in my Sweet Talk palette. It's this one right here, but it is originally from the I Think I Love You palette. And honestly, it's kind of more just opaquely gold. It doesn't have that shift to it at all, and the shift isn't super similar, but the gold shift that is in Gilding is a little bit similar to that, so that's why I wanted to include it. The next one up we have the shade Trust Issues, which is from Anastasia Jackie Aina, and this is another really new palette to me, so I haven't used it that much, but this is the shade right there. It is another one that just looks white in the pan, but it does have a gold greeny shift to it. I would say though that if you compare them, this one definitely looks a bit more white in the swatch than the shades from Clionadh, and again it doesn't have the glitter to it. Then we have the 2 Juvia's Place palette. The next one that I showed you was the one from the Saharan 2 palette, and the shade was the shade Aziza, which is this one right here. It is another one that looks pretty much white in the pan, but I'm hoping you can see the shift to it. It does have that kind of yellowish shift, and it is close, but again it just shows up more white and it's definitely not as intense. Then the last shade that I think is probably the best option for a dupe, although it doesn't have that multichromeness to it, it just have the shift. That is the shade Coral, which is from the Chai palette. It's this one right here. It does have like that yellowy kind of almost green shift to it, but it doesn't have as much of a white base as the other ones that I mentioned, but still I wouldn't say that this comes anywhere close to the Clionadh shade. So we have come to the very final shade from my Clionadh palette. This one is the shade Glint, which is this one down here. With this one it goes from green to gold to blue to purple, so I would say that this is the shade that kind of makes it full circle. It has that green to gold, which I've just talked about, and then it moves in to the blue and purple, which is where we started in this video. So I do think all of these shades kind of cover the spectrum of the rainbow, but the Glint shade is one that is again a bit more special, and the shift is a bit stronger as well. So this is another one that is a bit more expensive, and it does retail for 21 Canadian dollars. So let's just jump into the comparisons straight away. With this one again, I put all of them together. The first 3 shades are Clionadh shades, which is Corrosion, which is the glitter multichrome we just talked about before. Then we have Sunbeam, which is another glitter multichrome. And then lastly we have Luxe, which is one of the iridescent shades. Again, this is from the series 2. Then when it comes to the next 3, which are not multichromes or Clionadh shades, we have Electric from the Anastasia Subculture palette. We have Chef Shawan from the Juvia's Place Saharan 2 palette. I probably butchered that name. And lastly Coral from the Juvia's Place Tribe palette again. So when it comes to the Clionadh comparisons, again, I talked about Corrosion when I compared it to the previous shade, which was Gilding. And that is the shade right here. It is like that greeny gold to a blue shift. It's absolutely stunning. And then the next one I talked about is this one right here, which is a surprising comparison, I would say, because it is like a pink with a gold shift to it, but it is actually quite similar. And then the one that is basically an exact dupe used in a different formula, we have Luxe, which is this one right here. So yeah, I would say that Luxe, similar to what Aura was as well before, it is very, very similar to the shade Glint, but this is a little bit of a different formula. It doesn't have the same sparkles in it, but it is super, super similar in the shift. So if you have one, I wouldn't say you need the other. I would say this is probably the one duo that I'm a little bit disappointed I have both, because they are so similar. But since the shade is such a stunning one and I use these all the time, I am still not unhappy owning both. Then when it comes to the last three comparisons, we have the first one, which is Electric from the Anastasia Subculture palette, and this is the shade right here. You've probably seen this before, and to be honest, when I swatched this out, this was probably the shade out of all of the comparisons that I have that is most similar to a multichrome or one of the kind of glitter multichromes. It is not as sparkly, but it still has sparkles to it. The base in this isn't too strong, but it does have that super, super green shift to it. But then at certain angles it has like a purpley, almost blue shift as well, and it is absolutely stunning, and I'm very surprised by it. But this is probably the best dupe that I have. And if you're looking for something to kind of see what the Clionadh shades are like, think Electric from Anastasia Subculture, but just taken up quite a lot. The next one I compared is the shade Chef Shawan, I think it is. Like, again, I'm probably butchering it, but it's this shade right here. This is the only shade that I put in that isn't the main shift. The reason why I put this in is because it has that kind of green shift to it. It's more of an iridescent shade again, but it has that kind of greenish blue shift as what Glint has on the end of the spectrum, and that's why I wanted to keep this in. But it's really good if you're looking for that kind of end of the spectrum shift, and if you would kind of want to get the full effect of this eyeshadow, maybe pairing this or kind of having this topping it or putting it next to some of the other ones that I'm comparing it to would probably be the best bet, because then you could see the full kind of spectrum on your eye, although it wouldn't be like in the shift of light, it would more be kind of intentional placement, if that makes sense. But I did want to include this one. And then the last shade that I have to compare it to is the one that I also included in the last comparison, and that is Coral from the Juvia's Place Trial Palette. I would say Coral isn't the most similar comparison. It definitely leans a bit more yellowy than the kind of lime green that Glint has in it as the main base, but it is still a good option if you do have it in your collection. It is one of those more kind of iridescent goldy green shades. So there you guys with all for the comparisons of these eyeshadows. Before I wrap up this video, I just want to show you a demo of them as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on my eyes, and I'm just going to apply one of them on my lids. I haven't actually decided which one I want to apply yet, but I'm going to just have a look through and decide which one I want to put on, and then I'm going to apply it so you can see what it looks like in action. So I have scooched a bit closer, and hopefully you can see my eyes now. But I have the eyeshadows right here, and the shade that I decided to go with is the shade Gloaming, which is the one that I said I didn't have any comparisons to, and I just thought, why not just put that on my eyes so you can see it in action at least, and hopefully you will be able to see some of that kind of uniqueness in the eyeshadow. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually pick this up on my finger, and I'm going to apply it that way. So there you have the eyeshadow on my finger, and it looks pretty purple to you, but it looks super green and blue when I turn it towards me. But I am going to kind of apply this on my lids, so I'm going to look down in my mirror that I have here and just top this over. So hopefully here you can see the details. Just as last time, I'm going to try to insert some footage if I can of the actual shifts, but you can see what it looks like. It's just like a really kind of sheer topper shade. The base I had on today wasn't too deep, so it's kind of more of a neutral look today, but I really love how it looks. So I'm just going to scooch back out again and wrap up this video. So there you guys have this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions or anything about these shades, please leave them down below. I'll be happy to help you guys out. And also just keep in mind, Clionadh is having a sale on the 18th of December where all of the stained glass collection, all the multichromes will be 10% off, so keep that in mind. I think they will release some more information on the Instagram very soon. But I'm definitely going to pick up some more eyeshadows from them when they do have the sale. So I really would recommend you to pick up some of the other ones. I also do have the video on the deep Iridescent Multichromes, which I will leave down in the description box if you want to check it that out as well. And I'm really hoping to do the rest of the collection as well. It probably will take a while because these videos take quite a lot of preparation to film, but anyway, I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye guys!